Welcome back, my students, to a brand new episode of Comic Class. And in today's lesson, guys, we'll be starting an entire retrospective looking at Stan Lee and Steve Ditko's Spider-Man run, the first 38 issues. And yeah, today we're going to be looking at Amazing Fantasy number 15, which was the debut of Spider-Man as a character, his first issue. And yeah, without further ado, let's jump right into today's story. Let's go. So the story for Spider-Man, the first issue of Spider-Man ever, being Amazing Fantasy 15, shows Peter Parker basically being an outcast and basically being made fun of by a ton of his classmates. Now we get to see that Peter Parker is actually looking at the science experiment going on in this laboratory when a radioactive spider actually bites him and gives him spider powers. And after he realizes that he has spider powers, he basically starts using his abilities, his newfound abilities, to take on wrestlers and win some prize money. And once he realizes just how strong and fast he is and how agile he uses his abilities to get a lot of money and try to become famous off of his new powers. Now, Spider-Man, Peter Parker basically uses this money to create web shooters and shows his genius intellect even at this young age that he was able to create web shooters and web fluid. Peter also makes his iconic Spider-Man suit, and it's really cool to see, where this character started out from. And eventually he comes to this point where he basically wins, one of these bout fights and gets the prize money, and there's this guy escaping from a police officer, and he basically lets the guy get away. And the police officer even tells him that all he had to do was trick the dude or, grab him, and he would have been able to catch this dude and put him in jail. But, Spider-Man basically tells the cop that he's done being pushed around and that he's looking out for number one, that means me. And it shows how, cocky and how selfish that Spider-Man is acting at this moment, that he's not the responsibility type character that we, recognize in this first issue. This is Spider-Man in his beginnings, and not having the loss of Uncle Ben yet, and not having that responsibility kind of like put on him, and that feeling of having to take care of other people. So this scene is really good. Now we get to see that Aunt May and Uncle Ben basically buy Peter this microscope that he wanted, basically. And it just shows how kind-hearted they are, and it shows how selfish that Peter is in this moment, that he thinks to himself that he's okay with having these two people that love him and the rest of the world can kind of hang for all he cares. But this comes back to bite him in the butt. And why this does is because he continues to use his powers for selfish gain, and eventually he gets all this money and he goes back home, and there's police officers there, and they basically tell him and inform him that his Uncle Ben has been killed, shot and murdered. And Peter is basically angry, so he goes off and heads to where the cop told him that the criminal was being held off at. And it's this type of warehouse, so Spider-Man basically arrives and goes in to confront the dude and tells him that there's no way that he's going to be able to escape him and his vengeance, basically. So he basically webs the dude's gun in his hand to stop him from firing, and lands a punch on him. Now, I'm surprised that Spider-Man didn't take this dude's head off, considering this is when he first started, getting his powers, but I'm guessing he had been using it for a few weeks or months. And yeah, so we can kind of assume maybe he had a little bit of a hold on himself, and that's why he didn't kill this dude right? But yeah, so basically he takes off this guy, his hat, and he sees that this is the guy that he had a chance to stop earlier in the issue. And it's just pretty sad to see that Spider-Man had a chance to save Uncle Ben's life, but because of his own selfishness, someone that he loved died. And, there's no coming back from that, you're dead. And yeah, so basically, one of the, top, the captains and the rookie basically say, look, that it's him on a spider's web, and we get to see the guy has been webbed up and left for the cops. Spider-Man didn't kill him, which is really good. And we get to see Peter basically take off his mask and just start crying, saying that only if he had stopped him that Uncle Ben wouldn't have died. But now Uncle Ben is dead, and this is where we get the great line that with great power there must also come great responsibility, basically setting up Spider-Man's character in his own solo series, which will start in the next video. And yeah, That was Amazing Fantasy number 15. Amazing Fantasy number 15. When you read this, you know, in a modern era, we're talking about like, I don't know, like 50 plus years later in the modern era, that it's amazing how well this issue holds up. And it definitely is a testament to Stan Lee and Steve Ditko's run, being that, you know, these two guys really went well together. The stuff they were able to come up with, and these stories are fantastic today as they were in the 1960s. And yeah, that was Amazing Fantasy number 15, guys. I'm going to be doing an entire retrospective covering each issue in this run. I believe it covers Amazing 15 to Spider-Man number 1, Amazing Spider-Man number 1 through number 38. So I'll be covering all those different issues in the next coming days. And yeah, it's just going to be an awesome ride to go through each of Steve Ditko and Stan Lee's issues, because every story they did was just great. You know, it really is considered one of the greatest runs in all the comics for a lot of people, and for me, I consider it as well to be one of the greatest things I've ever read. It's just amazing to see the origins of all of these villains, these characters, these supporting characters, and Spider-Man himself, Peter Parker, and how they grow and how they develop, and just this world that they created, you know, for Spider-Man and his characters. It's amazing. But that's going to be all, guys. Until the next video, where we'll be looking at Spider-Man, The Amazing Spider-Man number 1. Be sure to subscribe so you don't miss out on this entire retrospective. There's going to be tons of videos covering the entire run. But until the next video, guys, God bless you. Until the next lesson, keep on reading those comics.
I am who I'm meant to be. Over and out again. My future needed clarity, so I could see